The war was over. After 12 long years of blood and fire across 1,000 worlds, humanity had won. The Dominion, an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, had fallen. Their fleets were ash. Their armies were broken. Their proud cities lay in ruins. Jake Colton stood in the processing center on Earth, waiting in a line of other veterans. He was 38 years old, but he felt much older. His brown hair had started to turn gray at the temples. His hands, once steady enough to thread a needle, now shook when he tried to hold them still. He had a scar that ran from his left ear to his jaw, a gift from a blade on a moon he could not remember the name of. He had served for 12 years. He had killed more enemies than he could count. He had watched friends die in ways that still visited him in his dreams. And now, like all the other veterans, he was being rewarded. The coalition government had announced it 3 weeks ago. Every decorated veteran would receive land on one of the new colony worlds. They would also receive something else. The nobles who had survived the war would be distributed as retainers. It was a fancy word. Everyone knew what it really meant. The proud rulers of the galaxy would now serve the species they had once called primitive. Jake did not want a retainer. He did not want land. He did not want anything except to be left alone. But the coalition did not care what he wanted. This was politics. This was revenge dressed up in nice words. Every veteran had to take one. No exceptions. The line moved forward. Jake stepped up to the desk where a young officer sat behind a computer screen. The officer looked at Jake's file and nodded. "Sergeant Jake Colton," the officer said. "Impressive record, 3 commendations for valor, survivor of the Siege of Prime." He paused. "I'm sorry about your brother." Jake said nothing. He did not like to talk about Danny. The officer typed something into his computer. "Your retainer has been assigned. A female, former minor aristocrat. Name is Sierra." He slid a tablet across the desk. "Sign here." Jake looked at the tablet. He thought about refusing again, but he had already tried twice and they had told him the same thing each time. This was not optional. This was the law. He signed. They brought her out 10 minutes later. She was tall, almost as tall as Jake. Her skin was pale violet, smooth like polished stone. Her hair was silver and fell past her shoulders. Her eyes were golden, like 2 coins catching the light. She was beautiful in the way a knife was beautiful, sharp and cold and dangerous. She wore simple gray clothes that the coalition had given her. Her wrists still showed marks where the restraints had been. She stood with her back straight and her chin high, but Jake could see the fear beneath her pride. He had seen that look before. He had seen it on the faces of prisoners who expected to die. A guard handed Jake a small bag containing her belongings. There was almost nothing inside. A few pieces of jewelry, a photograph, a small book written in script. "She's all yours," the guard said with a grin. "Have fun breaking her in." Jake did not respond to that. He just looked at Sierra and said, "Follow me." She followed. She had no choice. They took a transport ship to New Montana, a colony world on the edge of human space. It was a quiet place with rolling hills and wide open skies. 2 suns hung in the sky, one yellow and one orange, and they painted the clouds in colors that Jake had never seen on Earth. His homestead was small, a simple house made of wood and stone, a barn, a few fields that had not been planted yet, a dog named Rusty who barked once when they arrived and then went back to sleep on the porch. Jake carried the bag inside and set it on a table. Sierra stood in the doorway, looking around the room. Her face showed nothing, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "There are 2 bedrooms," Jake said. "Mine is on the left, yours is on the right." He walked to the right door and opened it. Inside was a simple room with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the fields. "The lock is on the inside. You can use it if you want." Sierra stared at him. She did not understand. "The lock is for you," Jake said, "so you can lock me out." Her golden eyes narrowed. "Why would you give me a lock?" Jake shrugged. Because it's your room. He walked to the kitchen and started making coffee. Sierra remained in the doorway, watching him like a hawk watching a snake. She was waiting for the trick. She was waiting for him to show his true face. Her people had kept slaves for thousands of years. She knew what masters did to their property. I don't know what they told you about this arrangement, Jake said without looking at her. But here's how it's going to work. You're not my slave. You're not my servant. I don't know what you are honestly, but you're not those things. Then what am I? Sierra asked. Her voice was quiet but hard. Jake poured 2 cups of coffee. He set one on the table near her. You're someone who got dealt a bad hand, same as me. He picked up his own cup and walked toward the door. Dinner is at 6. You can eat with me or in your room, your choice. He stepped outside onto the porch and sat down in an old wooden chair. Rusty lifted his head and then put it back down on his paws. The twin suns were setting, turning the sky into rivers of gold and pink. Inside the house, Sierra stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the cup of coffee he had left for her. She did not touch it. She did not trust it. She did not trust him. But she was confused, and confusion was not something Sierra was used to feeling. She went to her room and locked the door. She sat on the bed and looked at the wall and waited for the nightmare to begin. But the house stayed quiet, and Jake Colton did not come. 3 weeks passed on New Montana, and Sierra was still waiting for the monster to appear. Every day was the same. Jake woke before sunrise. He made breakfast for 2, even though Sierra often did not join him. He went out to the fields and worked until his shirt was soaked with sweat. He came back at midday, ate a simple lunch, and returned to work until the twin suns began to set. Then he sat on the porch with his dog and stared at the sky until it was time to sleep. He barely spoke to her, not out of cruelty, but because he barely spoke at all. He was a quiet man living a quiet life, and Sierra did not understand him. In culture, power was everything. The strong ruled, the weak served. A master who did not use his power was either stupid or planning something worse. Kindness was a weapon. Patience was a trap. Every gift had a price. So Sierra watched and waited. She ate the food he made because she needed to survive. She stayed in her room most of the time with the door locked. She studied him through the window when he worked in the fields. She listened at night for the sound of his footsteps outside her door. But the footsteps never came. The door was never tested. Jake Colton left her alone in a way that made no sense to her. She began to notice things about him. Small things. He talked to his dog, Rusty, in a soft voice that she had never heard him use with anyone else. He kept a small garden behind the house where he grew vegetables, and he tended it with care. He had a shelf of books in the main room, actual paper books, and sometimes in the evening she saw him reading by the light of a lamp. He also had nightmares. The first time she heard him scream, she nearly ran. The sound was raw and terrible, the sound of a man being torn apart from the inside. She pressed herself against the wall of her room and listened as he gasped and choked and called out names she did not recognize. Danny, Pete. He called for them like they could still answer, but they never did. The screaming stopped after a few minutes. She heard him get up, heard his footsteps cross the house, heard the front door open and close. She went to her window and looked out. Jake was sitting on the porch steps with his head in his hands. Rusty had pressed himself against Jake's side, whimpering softly. The twin moons hung in the sky, pale and cold, and Jake sat there alone in the dark for hours. The nightmares came almost every night after that. Sometimes he screamed. Sometimes he just woke up breathing hard and went outside. Sierra began to learn the rhythm of his pain. She began to understand that whatever she was suffering, he was suffering too. She started asking questions, not to Jake, but to the small computer terminal in the main room. Jake had told her she could use it if she wanted, and eventually her curiosity became stronger than her fear. She searched for his name and found his military record. What she read made her stop and read it again. Sergeant Jake Colton had enlisted at the age of 26 when the war began. He had served in over 40 combat operations. He had been wounded 7 times. He had received 3 commendations for valor, including one for carrying a wounded soldier through 2 miles of enemy territory while under fire. He had lost his entire squad at the Siege of Prime. Sierra knew that battle. Everyone knew that battle. It was the final battle of the war, the one where human forces had stormed the capital city of the Dominion and broken the back of the Empire. Millions had died on both sides. The streets had run purple with blood and red with human blood. She read the names of the people in Jake's squad. Age 24, Pete, age 30, age 27, age 29, Danny Colton, age 23. Danny Colton, his younger brother. Sierra closed the file and sat in the dark for a long time. A few nights later, she woke to the sound of something breaking. She unlocked her door and walked quietly into the main room. Jake was sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of something brown in front of him. A glass lay shattered on the floor. He was holding a photograph in his shaking hands. He was crying. Sierra had never seen a human cry before. She stood in the doorway and did not know what to do. She should go back to her room. She should lock the door and pretend she had not seen this. He was her captor. His pain was not her concern. But she did not move. "I couldn't save him," Jake said. He was not talking to her, he was talking to the photograph. "I promised Mom I'd bring him home, I promised her." His voice cracked. "He was right next to me, Sierra, right next to me. And then he wasn't." Sierra flinched at the sound of her name. He knew she was there. Jake looked up at her with red eyes. "They gave me medals for that day, called me a hero." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not a hero. Heroes save people. I just survived." He looked back down at the photograph. It showed 2 young men standing together, one tall with brown hair and one shorter with the same brown hair and a wide smile. Brothers. Anyone could see it. "I'm sorry," Sierra said. The words came out before she could stop them. Jake looked at her again. For a long moment he just studied her face. Then he nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "me too." He put the photograph in his pocket and stood up. He swayed a little but caught himself on the table. "You should go back to sleep. I'm sorry I woke you." He walked past her toward the door, and for the first time, Sierra did not flinch away from him. She watched him go outside and sit on the porch with Rusty at his feet. She cleaned up the broken glass. She put the bottle away. Then she went back to her room, but she did not lock the door. Something had changed inside her that night. She still did not trust Jake Colton. She still did not understand him, but she no longer thought of him as her captor. He was just a broken man trying to survive. And that was something Sierra understood better than she wanted to admit. Spring came to New Montana like a slow breath after a long winter. The snow melted from the hills. Green shoots pushed up through the dark soil. The air grew warm and smelled of growing things, and the twin suns stayed in the sky longer each day. Jake found Sierra standing by the window one morning looking out at the fields. She had been doing that more often lately, watching him work, watching the world turn green around her. "You want to help?" he asked. She turned to look at him. "What?" "Outside in the fields," he shrugged. "You look bored." Sierra's first instinct was to refuse. Work was for servants. She had been raised as a noble, and nobles did not put their hands in the dirt. But then she thought about spending another day alone in this house with nothing to do but think, and she surprised herself. "Yes," she said, "I will help." Jake handed her a pair of gloves and a hat to keep the suns off her face. They walked out to the fields together, Rusty trotting along beside them. The work was hard. Sierra had never done anything like it. Her hands were soft and the gloves could not protect them from the blisters that formed by midday. Her back ached from bending over. Her violet skin turned darker under the twin suns. She made mistakes constantly, pulling up seedlings instead of weeds, planting seeds too deep or too shallow. Jake never yelled at her. He never laughed at her failures. He just showed her the right way and moved on. His patience confused her at first, but then she began to appreciate it. He taught her like she was a person learning something new, not a fool who could not understand. They ate lunch together under a tree at the edge of the field. Jake had packed sandwiches and fruit and a jug of cold water. They sat in the shade and watched the clouds drift across the orange and yellow sky. "Why do you do this?" Sierra asked him. "You could use machines. I have seen the technology humans have. Why do you work with your hands?" Jake chewed his sandwich slowly before answering. "The war was all machines," he said. "Ships and guns and bombs. Everything was designed to kill as fast as possible." He looked down at his hands. "Out here I can make things grow. I can touch the dirt and know that something good is going to come from it." He shrugged. "It helps me remember that not everything is about death." Sierra thought about that for a long time. As the weeks passed, they fell into a routine. They worked together in the mornings. They ate lunch under the tree. In the afternoons, Sierra often stayed outside to tend the garden while Jake worked on the house or the barn. In the evenings, they ate dinner together at the kitchen table. They talked more now. Sierra told Jake about. She told him about the great crystal towers that had risen above the capital city, and the endless ceremonies and rituals of noble life. She told him about the hierarchy, how every knew their exact place in society from the moment they were born. "We believed we were the highest form of life in the galaxy," she admitted one night. "We thought other species existed to serve us. That was what we were taught." "And now?" Jake asked. Sierra looked at her hands. They were calloused now, marked with small cuts and healing blisters, the hands of a worker. "Now I do not know what I believe." She told him about the conquests, how armies would sweep across a world and take everything of value, how the survivors would be sorted. The strong became laborers, the weak were discarded, families were broken apart and sold, children were taken and raised to serve. "I knew it was wrong," she said quietly. "I think I always knew, but I never said anything, I just looked away." Jake was quiet for a long time. "We all have things we looked away from," he said finally, "things we wish we had stopped." The understanding between them grew, but not everyone was happy about it. Word spread through the veteran community that Jake Colton had not broken his. Some people admired him for it. They said he was a better man than most, but others were angry. They said he was weak. They said he was insulting the memory of everyone who had died in the war. One night 3 trucks pulled up outside Jake's house. He heard them coming and was already on the porch when they stopped. 6 men got out. They had been drinking. He could smell it from 20 feet away. The leader was a big man named Greg Tanner. Jake knew him from the war. They had served in different units, but everyone knew Greg. He had lost his son on Prime, and the grief had turned into something dark and ugly. "Evening, Jake," Greg said. He was trying to sound friendly, but his eyes were cold. "Heard you got yourself a—" "I did," Jake said. "Heard you've been treating her like a guest instead of what she is." Jake did not answer. Greg stepped closer. "My boy was 19 years old when they killed him. 19. And you've got one of them in your house, eating your food, sleeping in a bed like she's a person." "She is a person," Jake said quietly. Greg's face twisted with rage. "She's an animal, they all are, and I came here to show you how a real man handles animals." The other men started walking toward the house. Jake did not move from the porch. He reached behind the door and pulled out a rifle. He did not point it at anyone. He just held it. "She's under my protection," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Leave now." Greg laughed. "You'd shoot a fellow human to protect one of them." "I'd shoot anyone who tries to hurt someone in my home." The 2 men stared at each other. Behind Jake, a light came on in the house. He knew Sierra was watching from the window, but he did not turn around. "Her kind killed my son," Greg said, his voice cracking. "And I killed hers," Jake replied. I killed a lot of them, so did you. So did everyone who survived that war. He lowered his voice. The war is over, Greg, it's done. Hurting her won't bring your boy back. It won't bring any of them back. It'll just make you into the thing you hate. Greg stood there, breathing hard, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, Jake thought he might charge anyway. But then one of the other men put a hand on Greg's shoulder. Come on, the man said. Let's go. Greg spat on the ground. You're a disgrace, Colton. Your brother would be ashamed. The words hit Jake like a punch to the gut, but he did not move. He did not blink. He just watched as the men got back in their trucks and drove away into the darkness. When they were gone, Jake let out a long breath. His hands were shaking. He set down the rifle and sat on the porch steps, his head bowed. The door opened behind him. Sierra came out and sat down beside him. She did not say anything. She just sat with him in the dark while Rusty pressed against his other side. After a long time she spoke. You meant it, what you said about protecting me. Yes. Why? Jake looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was a broken world full of broken people, just like Earth, just like everywhere else the war had touched. Because someone has to start treating people like people, he said. Might as well be me. Sierra reached over and put her hand on his arm. It was the first time she had touched him willingly. Thank you, she said. Jake just nodded, and they sat together in the silence until the moons rose over the hills. The message came on a gray morning when clouds covered the twin suns and rain fell soft and steady on the fields of New Montana. Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, reading something on his tablet. His face was blank, the way it always got when he was trying not to feel something. Sierra stood at the stove, making tea the way he had taught her, and she knew something was wrong before he said a word. What is it? She asked. Jake set down the tablet. He did not look at her. The coalition made an announcement last night. They're recalling all the retainers. Sierra's hand stopped moving. The kettle began to whistle, but she did not hear it. Recalling, she repeated. There's been pressure from advocacy groups, people saying the retainer system is just slavery with a different name. Jake finally looked up at her. They're right, of course, it always was. He pushed the tablet toward her. All will be processed at coalition centers. You can choose to go back to or apply for refugee status in human space. Either way, you won't be assigned to anyone anymore. Sierra picked up the tablet and read the announcement. The words blurred in front of her eyes. She should feel happy. This was freedom. This was what she had wanted from the moment they put her on that transport ship and sent her to Earth. But she did not feel happy. She felt something cold and heavy in her chest, like a stone had settled there. When? She asked. 1 week. They're sending a transport to collect you. 1 week, 7 days. After months of living in this small house on this quiet world, she had 7 days left. Jake stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the rain falling on the fields they had planted together. The crops were coming up strong now, green rows stretching toward the horizon. They had built something here, something real. You're free, he said quietly, or you will be. Sierra did not know what to say. Part of her wanted to go back to, her mother might still be alive. Her cousins, the people she had grown up with, they were her blood. They were her history, but another part of her, a part that had grown slowly over the past months, did not want to leave this place, did not want to leave him. She spent the next few days in a fog. She went through the motions of life. She worked in the garden. She cooked meals. She sat on the porch in the evenings and watched the suns go down, but her mind was somewhere else, turning the same question over and over like a stone in her hand. What did she want? On the 5th night she could not sleep. She got up and walked into the main room. Jake was there, sitting in the dark, looking at something in his hands. It was the photograph of his brother. He always looked at it when he could not sleep. I've been thinking, Sierra said. Jake looked up at her. He set the photograph aside. I have been thinking about what I want, she continued. She walked closer and sat down in the chair across from him. "When I first came here, I wanted to survive. That was all. I thought you would hurt me and I was ready to endure it. I thought that was my life now." Jake said nothing, he just listened. "But you did not hurt me. You gave me a room with a lock. You gave me food and space and time. You never touched me. You never threatened me. You never made me feel like I was less than you." Her voice was shaking now, but she kept going. "You showed me something I did not know existed. You showed me that humans could be kind without wanting something in return." She looked into his eyes. "I do not want to go." Jake was very still. The only sound was the wind outside and Rusty's soft breathing by the door. "Sierra," he said carefully, "you've been through a lot. You don't have to decide anything right now. You don't owe me anything." "I know I do not owe you anything. That is why I am telling you this." She leaned forward. "I am not staying because I have to. I am staying because I want to. Because this place feels more like home than ever did. Because when I wake up in the morning, I am not afraid anymore." She paused. "Because of you." Jake closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was something raw in his face, something he had been hiding for a long time. "I can't ask you to stay," he said. "I won't. You were never mine to keep." "I know you do not have to ask." Sierra reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were rough and warm against hers. "I am asking you. Do you want me to stay?" He did not answer right away. She watched him struggle with something inside himself, some wall he had built to keep the world out. "What I want doesn't matter," he said finally. "It matters to me." Jake looked down at their hands. His jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, I want you to stay. I've wanted it for a long time." He looked up at her. "But it has to be your choice. Not mine, not theirs, yours. Do you understand?" Sierra nodded slowly. "I understand." They sat there for a long moment, holding hands in the darkness. Outside, the clouds parted, and the twin moons cast silver light through the window. "Then I choose to stay," Sierra said. Jake let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. He did not smile, but something in his face softened. Something healed. "Okay," he said, "okay." They did not say anything else that night. They did not need to. Sierra went back to her room, but she left the door open. And for the first time since the war ended, Jake slept without nightmares. The next morning, they sat together on the porch and watched the suns rise over the fields. Rusty lay between them, tail wagging lazily. The sky turned gold and pink, and the wet earth steamed in the growing warmth. "There's going to be trouble," Jake said. "The coalition won't just accept this. They'll have questions. There might be hearings." "I know," Sierra said. "People will say I forced you, manipulated you. They'll say you have some kind of trauma bond. Then I will tell them the truth." Jake looked at her. "And what's the truth?" Sierra smiled. It was the first real smile she had given since before the war, and it changed her face completely, made her look younger, made her look alive. "The truth is that a broken man showed kindness to a broken woman," she said, "and that kindness healed them both." Jake reached over and took her hand. They sat together in the morning light, and for the first time in a very long time, the future did not seem so dark. 2 days later, the coalition transport arrived, and Sierra was ready to tell them exactly what she wanted. The coalition transport landed in the field behind Jake's house at exactly noon. It was a military shuttle, gray and sharp, and it looked wrong against the green hills and the peaceful sky. 2 armed guards stepped out first, followed by an officer in a crisp uniform. Her name was Captain Vance. She had short dark hair and tired eyes that had seen too much paperwork. She walked up to the porch where Jake and Sierra stood waiting and looked at them like they were a problem she had not expected. "Sergeant Colton," she said, "I'm here to collect the retainer assigned to your care." Jake did not move. "She's not coming." Captain Vance blinked. "Excuse me." "She's made her choice. She wants to stay." The captain looked at Sierra. "Is this true?" Sierra stepped forward. She stood straight, the way she had been taught as a noble, but there was no arrogance in it now, just certainty. "It is true," she said. "I wish to remain here on New Montana of my own free will." Captain Vance frowned. She pulled out a tablet and checked something on the screen. "The recall order applies to all retainers. No exceptions. You have to be processed." "Then process me here," Sierra said. "Ask me your questions. Run your tests. I will cooperate, but I will not leave this place." The captain looked from Sierra to Jake and back again. She was clearly not prepared for this. The recall had been designed to free from human veterans, not to deal with one who wanted to stay. "I'm going to have to report this," she said. "This is above my authority." "Report whatever you need to," Jake said. "We'll be here." Captain Vance left with her guards, but the shuttle stayed. More officers came over the following days. Investigators, psychologists, government lawyers. They asked Sierra hundreds of questions. They asked if Jake had threatened her, hurt her, manipulated her. They asked if she understood what she was choosing. They asked if she was afraid. Sierra answered every question the same way, calmly, clearly, and with absolute certainty. "He never touched me without my consent. He never raised his voice to me. He never made me work or demanded anything from me. He gave me a room with a lock and told me it was for my protection, not his. He treated me like a person from the very first day." The psychologists ran their tests. They found no signs of coercion, no signs of manipulation, no signs of trauma bonding. What they found was a woman who had made a choice with open eyes. But that was not enough for everyone. Advocacy groups got involved. Some supported Sierra's choice and called it a victory for personal freedom. Others claimed she had been brainwashed, that no former slave could truly choose to stay with their master. The story spread across the news networks. People argued about it in bars and offices and on the streets. Jake Colton and Sierra became names that everyone knew. Jake refused to speak publicly. He stayed on his farm, worked his fields, and ignored the reporters who gathered at the edge of his property. But Sierra decided that she had something to say. She recorded a statement in the main room of Jake's house, sitting in the chair where she had spent so many evenings learning what humans were really like. Her silver hair was tied back. Her golden eyes looked directly into the camera. Her voice was steady and clear. "I was born into the Dominion," she began. "I was raised to believe that my people were superior to all others. I was taught that humans were primitive animals, barely better than beasts. When my people conquered a world, we took everything. We broke families apart. We worked populations to death. We believed it was our right." She paused. "When the war ended and I was assigned to a human veteran, I expected the same treatment. I expected brutality. I expected revenge. I expected to be broken, the way my people had broken so many others. It was what I deserved." Her voice softened. "But that is not what happened. Jake Colton gave me something that my own people never gave me. He gave me a choice. He never demanded my loyalty. He never asked for my gratitude. He never tried to change who I was or make me into something I was not. He simply let me exist. He let me heal. He showed me kindness without expecting anything in return." She leaned forward slightly. "My people lost the war because we did not understand humanity. We thought they were weak because they showed compassion. We thought they were foolish because they valued individual life. We were wrong. Their compassion is their strength. Their respect for choice is what makes them different from us." Her golden eyes seemed to glow in the light. "I am not staying with Jake Colton because I am afraid to leave. I am not staying because I have nowhere else to go. I am staying because he showed me what it means to be treated as an equal. He showed me what it means to be free. And I choose freely to build a life beside the man who gave me that gift." She looked into the camera one last time. Humanity did not win the war through cruelty. They won because they endure, they rebuild, they forgive, and that is something my people never understood. The statement spread across human and alien space. It was translated into 100 languages. It was played in schools and government buildings and refugee camps. Some people called it propaganda. Others called it the most important speech since the war ended. The coalition ruled in Sierra's favor. She was granted refugee status and legal residence on New Montana. She was free to stay, and she was free to leave whenever she wanted. The choice was hers. A year passed. The farm had doubled in size. Jake had hired 2 workers from the nearby town to help with the harvest. The barn had a new roof. The house had a fresh coat of paint. And in the garden behind the house, flowers bloomed that Sierra had planted herself, strange purple flowers from seeds she had saved from before the war. She still had nightmares sometimes. So did Jake. But now, when one of them woke in the dark, the other was there. They did not always talk. Sometimes they just sat together on the porch and watched the moons cross the sky. Sometimes that was enough. Jake still thought about his brother. He still visited the small memorial he had built at the edge of the property, where Danny's name was carved into a stone beside the names of and Pete and Ann. He would never stop missing them. That was not how grief worked. But he had learned to carry it, and he was no longer carrying it alone. One evening, as the twin suns of New Montana painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Sierra found Jake on the porch. Rusty was getting old now, gray around the muzzle, and he slept more than he used to. But he still lifted his head when Sierra sat down beside Jake. "I received a message today," she said, "from." Jake looked at her. "Your family." "My cousin. She survived the war. She wants to know if I am well." "What did you tell her?" Sierra smiled and took his hand. Her fingers were calloused now, marked by months of honest work. The hands of a farmer, the hands of someone who had built something real. "I told her I found something better than survival," she said. "I found a home." Jake squeezed her hand gently. He did not say anything. He did not need to. They sat together and watched the suns go down, 2 broken people who had somehow made each other whole. The war was over. The galaxy was still healing. But here, on this small farm at the edge of human space, something new had begun. And for the first time in a very long time, Jake Colton believed that the future might be worth seeing. Sierra leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For treating me like a person when no one else would." Jake put his arm around her and looked out at the fading light. "That's not heroism, Sierra," he said. "That's just being human." And in that moment, watching the stars come out one by one over the fields they had planted together, Sierra finally understood what that meant.